A cowboy lost a bet in Texas and won the only woman who could break his bet. Dust swirled around the wooden buildings of Laredo, a small town where cowboys, ranchers, and wanderers gathered to rest, trade stories, and let off steam after long days on the ranch. Among the people in this town was Jack Sullivan, a young cowboy with a reputation for being daring, confident, and just a little reckless. Jack had grown up riding horses almost as soon as he could walk. He knew the feel of the saddle, the rhythm of cattle drives, and the endless expanse of the prairie like the back of his hand. He had charm, quick wit, and a stubborn streak that often got him into trouble. Jack loved a challenge and he loved a crowd, especially when he could show off a little. On this particular evening, Jack found himself at the local saloon, a lively place filled with the smell of whiskey, tobacco, and worn wood. The air was thick with laughter, the clatter of cards, and the occasional shout as someone won or lost a hand of poker. Jack leaned against the bar nursing a drink, his sharp eyes scanning the room. He wasn't in the mood to gamble tonight, but the atmosphere was infectious, and soon enough, he was drawn into a game with a group of ranchers and drifters who were all too eager to test their luck against him. The poker table was a rough one, made from old wood and scarred from years of similar games. Around it sat men who had seen more than their fair share of hardships, calloused hands, sun-baked faces, and eyes that seemed to measure every move before it was made. Jack sat down with a confident smile, ready to take on whatever came his way. The first few rounds went well. He won small hands with clever bluffs and careful bets. The crowd cheered when he won, and Jack's confidence swelled. He loved the attention, loved the feeling of being in control. But the night was still young, and with it came bigger risks. It was during the third round that Jack made the fateful mistake. A man named Hank, a rugged ranch hand with a mischievous glint in his eye, challenged him. Hank was known for being a bit of a trickster, someone who could read people easily and knew how to push their buttons. He leaned across the table, his voice low but firm. "Jack, I say we make this interesting. How about a real bet? You lose, and you agree to do anything I ask for a whole week." The words hung in the air like a spark waiting to ignite. Jack's first instinct was caution. He had never lost a bet like this before, and he knew it could lead to humiliation if he failed. But pride ran deep in his veins, and the thought of backing down in front of the crowd was unbearable. He straightened in his chair, flashing a confident grin. "Anything you ask, huh?" he said, his voice steady. "You're on." The saloon erupted with laughter and cheers. Everyone loved a story that promised excitement, and Jack's boldness had just turned an ordinary night into something unforgettable. The game continued, the stakes rising with each round. Jack played with skill, relying on years of experience and a natural instinct for reading his opponents. But Hank had a way of turning luck in his favor, and slowly, Jack found himself losing hand after hand. The pile of coins in front of him dwindled, and a knot of tension grew in his chest. The crowd watched in silence, sensing the drama unfold. Jack's pride was on the line, and for the first time that evening, he began to feel the sting of uncertainty. Finally, it came down to a single hand. Jack's heart pounded as he looked at his cards. He knew he could win if he played carefully, but a flicker of overconfidence got the better of him. He bluffed, hoping to intimidate Hank, but Hank called without hesitation. The cards were revealed. Jack had lost. The room erupted in a mixture of laughter, claps, and playful jeers. Jack leaned back in his chair, a mixture of disbelief and frustration washing over him. He had lost the bet, and now the terms were clear. He would have to follow through on whatever Hank demanded. Hank's grin widened. He leaned closer to Jack and said in a low voice, almost as if sharing a secret, "I've got a challenge for you, Jack. There's a woman in this town, the only one who could ever truly test a man like you. If you can win her heart, then you'll prove you're not just a gambler, you're someone worth respecting." Jack raised an eyebrow, intrigued and slightly nervous. He had heard of Clara James, a woman whose reputation for strength, independence, and charm had spread far and wide across the Texas plains. To win her was no small feat, and the thought of being challenged in this way both excited and terrified him. The crowd sensed the tension and leaned in closer, eager to see how Jack would respond. He straightened his shoulders, took a deep breath, and nodded. "Consider it done," he said. Inside, however, he felt the weight of the challenge pressing down on him. Clara James was no ordinary woman. She had grown up on the plains, riding horses, taming cattle, and earning the respect of every man she met. Stories of her toughness were legendary. She could handle a stampede, fix a fence, and charm the toughest hearts, all at the same time. Jack knew this wouldn't be easy, and that the bet had suddenly become something far more serious than a simple game of poker. That night, Jack left the saloon with a mixture of excitement and apprehension. The sky above was a deep purple, dotted with stars that seemed to promise adventure. The streets of Laredo were quiet now, the hustle of the day replaced by the gentle creaking of wooden porches and the distant lowing of cattle. Jack walked slowly, thinking about what lay ahead. Winning Clara's heart would not be a matter of charm alone. He would have to work, earn her trust, and prove that he was more than a reckless gambler. As he rode back to his small cabin on the edge of town, he replayed the events of the night in his mind. The laughter, the cheers, the sting of loss, and the weight of the bet, all of it formed a whirlwind of emotion he couldn't ignore. Jack knew one thing for certain. This was the beginning of something extraordinary. He had lost a bet, yes, but in doing so, he had been handed a challenge that could change his life forever. And somewhere deep down, he felt a spark of hope. Maybe, just maybe, this gamble would be the most rewarding of his life. Jack spent the rest of the night preparing himself for the days ahead. He cleaned his saddle, polished his boots, and even practiced a few lines to charm a woman, though he wasn't sure if charm alone would be enough. The prairie was quiet, and the moon cast a silver glow over the land, illuminating the vast fields and endless sky. It was a reminder that life was full of possibilities, and that sometimes the most unexpected losses could lead to the greatest adventures. By dawn, Jack was ready. The sun rose in brilliant shades of pink and orange, signaling the start of a new day and a new chapter in his life. He saddled his horse, tightened the reins, and took a deep breath of the crisp morning air. Today, he would begin his journey to meet Clara James, the woman who could break even the strongest cowboys. He didn't know what awaited him, but he knew one thing. He would face it with courage, determination, and a heart open to whatever the prairie had in store. And so, with the wind in his hair and the endless horizon before him, Jack Sullivan set out on a path that would test him like never before. What had begun as a lost bet in a dusty saloon was about to become the story of his life, a story of courage, challenge, and the unexpected ways in which love could find even the most stubborn of cowboys. Jack Sullivan had never met Clara James, but the stories about her had reached every corner of Laredo. They spoke of her as if she were a force of nature, a woman as strong and untamable as the prairie winds. She could ride any horse, mend any fence, and face dangers that would make the most seasoned cowboys pause. Yet despite her toughness, there were whispers of kindness, a sense of fairness, and a sharp wit that could leave a man speechless. For Jack, hearing about her was like hearing of a legend come to life, a woman whose presence could fill a room and whose courage could rival his own. Jack spent the first few days thinking carefully about how he would meet her. He knew that rushing in with a bold, confident approach, the kind he often used with women in town, wouldn't work. Clara James wasn't impressed by bravado or empty promises. She respected hard work, honesty, and a willingness to meet challenges head-on. Jack realized that winning her heart would not be easy, and he would have to prove himself in ways he had never imagined. On the morning he finally rode toward Clara's ranch, the sky was painted in soft pastels, and the prairie seemed to stretch endlessly before him. Jack adjusted his hat, tightened the reins, and whispered to himself, "Time to meet the woman who could change everything." His horse picked up a steady pace, carrying him across the fields as he thought about what he would say, how he would behave, and how he could make a genuine impression. Arriving at the ranch, Jack noticed the skill and care with which everything was maintained. The fences were sturdy, the barns well kept, and the animals calm and healthy. It was clear that the woman who lived here took her work seriously. And then he saw her. Clara James appeared from the barn, her silhouette strong and confident. She carried herself with a quiet authority, yet there was a warmth in her smile that hinted at the kindness beneath her toughness. Jack's heart raced, but he forced himself to appear calm, tipping his hat respectfully. "Good morning, ma'am," he said, his voice steady but slightly tinged with nervousness. "I'm Jack Sullivan. I've heard a lot about you." Clara raised an eyebrow, studying him carefully. Her eyes, sharp and observant, seemed to look right through him, reading his intentions, his confidence, and perhaps even his fears. "I hear you're the one who lost a bet in Laredo," she said, her tone teasing but firm. "And now you're here to win my heart," Jack swallowed, nodding. "That's the idea, but I know it won't be easy. I'm ready to work to earn your trust and prove I'm more than just a gambler." Clara's lips curled into a faint smile. "We'll see about that," she said. "If you want to impress me, you'll have to do more than talk. Actions speak louder than words around here." She handed him a pitchfork, motioning toward the corral. "The cattle need feeding, the fence needs repair, and there's plenty of work to keep you busy. Let's see what you're made of." Jack accepted the challenge without hesitation, understanding that this was the only way to earn her respect. The first day was harder than he had expected. The sun beat down mercilessly, and the work was relentless. Jack found himself sweating, muscles aching, and hands blistered. Yet he pushed through, determined not to falter. Clara watched silently, occasionally offering brief advice or a pointed remark to test his patience. At first, Jack struggled, fumbling with tasks he had never done before. He dropped tools, misjudged distances, and tripped over the uneven ground. But he refused to give up, learning quickly from his mistakes and adapting to the demands of the ranch. As the day wore on, Jack began to notice something remarkable about Clara. She was firm, no doubt, but also fair and patient. She didn't expect perfection, but she did expect effort and determination. Her guidance was precise, her corrections delivered with a sharp but gentle hand. And despite the challenging work, there was a sense of rhythm and satisfaction in the tasks. Jack realized that Clara's strength wasn't just in her physical ability, it was in her character, her intelligence, and her unwavering standards. By the end of the day, Jack was exhausted but proud. He had managed to feed the cattle, repair the fence, and complete the chores with only a few minor mistakes. Clara nodded approvingly, a rare smile flickering across her face. "Not bad, Jack," she said. "You've got determination, and that counts for a lot around here." Most men would have quit by now. Jack felt a surge of pride, but he also understood that this was only the beginning. To win Clara's heart, he would need to continue proving himself every day, showing consistency, humility, and respect for the work and the life she valued so deeply. Over the next few days, Jack's routine became a rhythm of early mornings, hard work, and small lessons in patience and humility. He learned how to mend fences properly, handle horses with care, and even assist in rounding up cattle during small drives. Clara tested him constantly, assigning tasks that required both strength and intelligence. Sometimes she would set challenges that seemed impossible, just to see how he would react. Jack quickly learned that complaining or showing frustration would get him nowhere. Only focus, effort, and a willingness to learn would earn her respect. At the same time, Jack began to see glimpses of Clara's softer side. During breaks, She would share stories of growing up on the ranch, of her father teaching her to ride and handle animals, and of the pride she felt in maintaining the land and the animals. Jack listened intently, fascinated not just by the stories themselves, but by the woman who spoke them with such passion and confidence. He realized that her strength came from experience and love for the life she had built, not from trying to dominate others. This understanding deepened his admiration for her and made his mission more meaningful than simply winning a bet. By the end of the first week, Jack had earned a small measure of Clara's respect. She had begun to trust him, giving him responsibilities without constant oversight and acknowledging his growing skill. They shared quiet moments in the evenings, repairing tools by the firelight or tending to animals as the sun dipped below the horizon. Jack learned that humor and humility were as important as hard work. A well-timed joke, a sincere compliment, or simply showing concern for the animals could soften Clara's stern exterior and create a genuine connection. But Clara remained cautious. She had seen many men come and go, some confident, some charming, and some willing to make promises they couldn't keep. Jack's challenge was not only to prove his capability, but also his integrity. Every action he took, every task he completed, was being observed and weighed against the legend she had built around her life. Jack understood this fully. Winning Clara's heart would not be about grand gestures or flashy displays. It would be about consistent effort, respect, and sincerity over time. One afternoon, a sudden thunderstorm swept across the plains, forcing Jack and Clara to seek shelter in the barn. Rain pelted the roof, and wind howled through the gaps in the walls, rattling the wood. Jack noticed Clara remained calm and composed, securing the animals and checking on the fences despite the storm. Watching her in action, he felt a mixture of awe and admiration. Here was a woman who could face danger without hesitation, who could remain steady under pressure, and who had built her life through sheer determination and courage. It became clear to Jack that this challenge was about more than winning a bet. It was about learning from someone who embodied strength, intelligence, and heart. By the time the storm passed, Jack felt he had grown in ways he hadn't expected. He had faced physical challenges, learned humility, and begun to understand what true courage and integrity looked like. Clara's presence was a constant reminder that strength was not just about muscle or skill, but about character, patience, and respect for others. Jack realized that the legend he had heard about Clara James was true, but what made her truly remarkable was not just her toughness. It was the wisdom, kindness, and determination that underpinned it. As the sun broke through the clouds and painted the prairie in a soft golden light, Jack felt a renewed sense of purpose. Winning Clara's heart was no longer just a matter of fulfilling a bet. It was about earning the respect of a woman who could challenge him, inspire him, and perhaps even change him. He understood that the path ahead would not be easy, but it would be meaningful, and the lessons he learned along the way would shape him as much as the woman he hoped to win. And so, with the storm behind them and the endless horizon ahead, Jack Sullivan continued his journey, not just to win a bet, but to prove himself worthy of the woman who could break even the strongest of cowboys in every way that mattered. Each day brought new lessons, new challenges, and new opportunities to grow. And through it all, Jack felt a spark of hope and excitement, knowing that the adventure had only just begun. By the second week of his challenge, Jack Sullivan had settled into a steady routine at Clara James's ranch. Each morning began with the first light of dawn, the sky painted in soft shades of pink and gold. Jack would saddle his horse, tighten his boots, and head out to check the cattle, mend fences, or assist with any chores Clara had planned for the day. The work was hard, sometimes exhausting, but Jack welcomed it. He knew that each task, no matter how small or difficult, was another opportunity to earn Clara's respect and to learn from the woman who had become both his challenge and his inspiration. Clara, for her part, remained vigilant. She watched Jack closely, observing not just how he handled the work but how he handled himself. She noticed when he showed patience, when he remained calm under pressure, and when he took the initiative to help without being asked. At first, Clara's approval was quiet and measured. A nod here, a brief smile there, but gradually Jack began to sense a shift. He was no longer simply the newcomer trying to impress her. He was becoming someone she could rely on, someone she could trust with responsibilities on her ranch. One morning, Clara handed Jack a particularly challenging task. He was to repair a section of fence that had been damaged by the wind during the previous night's storm. The wood was old and splintered, and the task required both strength and precision. Jack rolled up his sleeves and got to work, hammering nails and replacing boards with care. Clara observed him silently, occasionally offering advice when she saw a mistake, but mostly letting him figure things out on his own. Jack worked steadily, sweat running down his face, muscles aching, but he refused to give up. By the time the sun reached its peak, the fence stood strong and secure, a testament to both his determination and growing skill. Impressed by his persistence, Clara decided to introduce Jack to another aspect of ranch life, working with the horses. She led him to the stables, where a group of spirited horses waited, each with its own personality and quirks. Jack knew riding horses well, but handling multiple horses in a busy stable required patience, attention, and a careful touch. Clara instructed him on grooming, feeding, and calming the more anxious animals. Jack quickly realized that this was about more than just skill. It was about understanding the creatures, respecting their needs, and earning their trust. As he worked, he began to see a new side of Clara as well. Her patience with the animals mirrored her expectations for him. She valued care, attention, and respect, not just brute strength. Their days were filled with hard work, yet there were moments of laughter and connection that made the effort worthwhile. Clara had a sharp sense of humor, and she often teased Jack when he struggled with a task or made a small mistake. Jack, in turn, learned to laugh at himself, finding joy in the challenge and in the small victories that came with each successful day. Slowly, the walls between them began to soften. Jack's admiration for Clara grew, and he found himself looking forward not just to the work, but to the conversations, the shared meals, and the quiet moments in the evening when they could sit by the fire and talk about life. One afternoon, Clara decided it was time to test Jack in a way that required both courage and quick thinking. A young calf had wandered off during a routine check, and the terrain was rough and unfamiliar. Clara instructed Jack to locate the calf and guide it safely back to the ranch. Jack mounted his horse, feeling a mix of excitement and nervousness. The prairie stretched endlessly before him, dotted with hills and patches of tall grass. He followed Clara's instructions carefully, keeping the calf in sight and guiding it patiently. When he finally returned to the ranch with the calf safely in tow, Clara nodded with approval. "You're learning quickly," she said. "But remember, courage is only part of it. You need patience, focus, and respect for the work, and for the life around you." Jack took her words to heart. Each day became a lesson in humility and perseverance. He discovered that winning Clara's heart was not about grand gestures or flashy displays of skill. It was about consistency, effort, and sincerity. He learned to anticipate her needs, to notice small details, and to approach every task with care. In doing so, he began to change, not just in the way he worked, but in the way he thought about responsibility, respect, and partnership. Clara was teaching him, in the quietest and most effective way, what it truly meant to be strong, capable, and trustworthy. Evenings were a time for reflection and connection. After the day's work was done, Jack and Clara would often sit by the fire, tending to tools, mending clothing, or simply sharing stories. Clara spoke of her childhood on the ranch, the lessons her parents had taught her, and the pride she took in the life she had built. Jack listened, captivated not just by the stories but by the way Clara spoke, her voice steady, confident, and full of wisdom. He began to understand that her strength was not just physical, it was born from experience, patience, and a deep respect for life. There were also lighter moments, moments that made Jack smile and feel a sense of belonging. He helped Clara with simple joys like gathering fresh eggs, feeding the animals, or preparing meals. She showed him how to bake bread over a fire, how to pluck chickens without hesitation, and how to find the best spots for watering the animals. Jack found himself laughing more than he had in years, enjoying the simplicity and honesty of ranch life. He realized that these small, shared experiences were as important as any challenge or test. They created a connection, a sense of partnership, and a growing trust between them. Despite the growing closeness, Clara remained cautious. She had seen many men come and go, men who thought they could win her with charm alone. Jack understood this fully. He knew that to gain her trust and affection, he had to continue proving himself daily, showing that his intentions were sincere and that he valued her life, her work, and her character. Each task he completed, each challenge he faced, was another step in demonstrating that he was worthy of her respect and perhaps, in time, her heart. One day, Clara introduced a particularly demanding challenge. A section of the ranch had been neglected, overgrown with weeds, and in need of serious repair. Jack was assigned to clear the land, repair fences, and ensure the area was safe for livestock. The work was grueling, pushing him to his limits both physically and mentally. Yet with Clara's guidance and encouragement, Jack persevered. He learned to pace himself, to focus on the task at hand, and to appreciate the satisfaction that came from seeing a job well done. By the time the sun set, the land had been transformed, and Jack felt a deep sense of accomplishment. Clara watched him with a mixture of pride and approval. "You've come a long way in a short time," she said. "I can see your effort, your dedication, and your willingness to learn. That counts for more than you know." Jack smiled, grateful not just for her praise, but for the guidance and lessons that had helped him grow. He realized that this experience was about far more than a bet. It was about becoming a better man, someone capable of earning respect, trust, and perhaps even love. As the weeks passed, Jack and Clara grew closer, their bond strengthened by shared work, laughter, and quiet understanding. Jack began to see Clara not just as a challenge or a legend, but as a woman of depth, character, and heart. He admired her strength, her intelligence, and her unwavering standards. In turn, Clara began to recognize Jack's sincerity, his determination, and his growing respect for her life and her work. The connection between them deepened, moving beyond challenge and into something real and meaningful. By the end of the third week, Jack Sullivan had learned more about life, love, and respect than he could have imagined. Winning Clara's heart was no longer about completing a bet. It was about becoming a man worthy of her trust and affection. He had discovered that true courage came not from bravado or recklessness, but from patience, integrity, and the willingness to face challenges with honesty and effort. Clara, for her part, had begun to see that Jack was more than a gambler or a boastful cowboy. He was a man willing to grow, to learn, and to earn the love of a woman who could break even the strongest of men. And so, as the prairie stretched endlessly beneath the setting sun, Jack and Clara continued their journey together. Each day brought new challenges, new lessons, and new opportunities for growth. Through hard work, laughter, and quiet moments of connection, they were building a foundation of respect, trust, and affection, one that would carry them forward into the future, stronger than any bet, challenge, or legend. The story of Jack Sullivan and Clara James was no longer just about a lost bet. It was about two people discovering each other, learning from each other, and finding something far more valuable than they could have ever imagined. As the days turned into weeks, Jack Sullivan felt himself growing more confident, more capable, and more connected to Clara James. Their partnership on the ranch had evolved beyond the challenges and tests he had faced in the beginning. They worked side by side, sharing laughter, conversation, and the satisfaction that came from a job well done. But life on the prairie was unpredictable, and sometimes the greatest lessons came not from daily routines but from moments of sudden crisis. It was a late afternoon when the sky darkened unexpectedly. The wind picked up with alarming speed, tugging at the trees and sending dust swirling across the fields. Jack and Clara were in the middle of moving a small herd of cattle back to the corral when the first flashes of lightning streaked across the horizon. The storm arrived suddenly, fierce and powerful, with rain lashing down and thunder rolling across the plains. Jack's heart pounded, not with fear but with determination. He knew that in this storm, the safety of the cattle, the fences, and the ranch itself would depend on quick thinking and courage. Clara, ever calm and resourceful, immediately began organizing the herd, directing Jack to assist in guiding them away from low-lying areas where water might collect. The rain soaked through their clothing within minutes, but neither of them hesitated. The sound of the storm was deafening, but Clara's voice carried clear above the wind. "Jack, over here, keep them moving toward the corral," she shouted. Jack responded without hesitation, riding alongside the frightened animals, using every skill he had learned over the past weeks to keep them under control. At one point, a calf broke free, darting toward a section of damaged fence. Jack's instincts kicked in immediately. He spurred his horse and chased after the calf, heart racing as the rain soaked his face and the wind tried to throw him off balance. Clara followed close behind, her presence steady and reassuring. Working together, they managed to corral the calf back toward the safety of the pen. The storm showed no mercy, yet Jack felt a surge of pride. This was the true test, not a bet, not a challenge, but a real-life situation that demanded courage, skill, and teamwork. After securing the herd, they turned their attention to the fence that had been damaged during the storm. Jack remembered the lessons Clara had taught him about precision, patience, and resilience. Despite the pouring rain, they worked tirelessly, reinforcing the fence and securing any weak spots. Each hammer strike and rope knot was executed with care, guided by Clara's steady instruction. Jack could see the admiration in her eyes as she watched him work, not just for the effort he put in, but for the calm, focused way he handled the pressure. By the time the storm began to subside, the sun had dipped low, casting a golden light across the wet prairie. The work was done, and the ranch was secure, but the day had tested them both in ways that went beyond physical labor. Jack felt a deep sense of accomplishment, not only for what they had achieved, but for the bond that had strengthened between them. Clara's respect for him had grown, and he felt a quiet confidence that they were beginning to understand each other on a much deeper level. That evening, soaked to the bone and exhausted, they sat by a fire in the barn, warming their hands and sharing a quiet meal. The storm outside had left a peaceful calm over the land, and the crackle of the fire provided a comforting background. Clara looked at Jack with a faint, thoughtful smile. "You didn't hesitate today," she said softly. "You acted with courage and you thought quickly. That's not something every man could do." Jack smiled, grateful for her words, but he knew that this moment was about more than praise. It was about trust, respect, and the recognition that their partnership had reached a new level. In the days that followed, Jack and Clara continued to work together, but the storm had changed something between them. Their connection was no longer just built on daily chores and shared humor. It was built on experience, courage, and the knowledge that they could rely on each other in the most challenging circumstances. Jack began to see Clara not just as a challenge to be won, but as a partner, an equal, and someone whose strength complemented his own. He admired her wisdom, her determination, and the quiet way she led without demanding attention or praise. Clara, in turn, saw a new side of Jack. The man who had arrived weeks earlier, full of confidence and charm, had matured into someone dependable, thoughtful, and courageous. She saw the patience he had developed, the way he had learned to anticipate problems, and the respect he showed not only for her but for the land, the animals, and the life they were building together. It became clear that Jack was no longer just a cowboy fulfilling a bet. He was becoming someone worthy of trust, respect, and perhaps even affection. One afternoon, Clara decided to introduce Jack to another challenge, one that would test both his skill and his ability to stay calm under pressure. A section of the ranch had a loose herd of cattle that needed to be rounded up and moved to higher ground before the next storm arrived. Jack mounted his horse, feeling both excitement and focus. Clara guided him through the plan, explaining the strategy for rounding up the cattle and ensuring none were lost or injured. The task required careful observation, quick thinking, and precise coordination. Jack listened closely, nodding, and followed her instructions meticulously. As they worked, Jack realized that the lessons he had learned over the past weeks were invaluable. He understood the importance of patience, the value of preparation, and the strength that came from collaboration. Clara's guidance had taught him that courage was not about acting recklessly, but about staying focused, thinking ahead, and being ready to face whatever challenges arose. By the time the herd was safely relocated, Jack felt a deep sense of satisfaction, not only for the work accomplished but for the trust and teamwork that had made it possible. That evening, as they repaired equipment by the fire, Clara spoke with a tone of quiet pride. "Jack, you've proven more than I expected. You've faced challenges, worked hard, and shown courage under pressure. That matters more than any bet or wager." Jack nodded, feeling a mix of humility and pride. He knew that this moment marked a turning point, not just in their relationship, but in his understanding of what it meant to be truly strong and dependable. The bet that had brought him to Clara's ranch had transformed into something far greater, a partnership built on mutual respect, shared effort, and genuine admiration. Over the next few days, the bond between them deepened even further. Jack found himself anticipating Clara's needs, offering help before she asked, and learning to read the subtle cues that guided life on the ranch. They shared moments of laughter, quiet conversation, and simple joys, like watching the sun set over the prairie or listening to the soft sounds of cattle settling for the night. Each day, Jack realized more clearly that Clara was not just the woman who could challenge him. She was someone whose strength, wisdom, and kindness inspired him to be better. One evening, as they walked along a fence line checking the cattle, Clara paused and looked at Jack. "You've come a long way," she said. "You've proven you're capable, dependable, and willing to learn. But more than that, you've shown respect for the work, for the land, and for me. That's what matters most." Jack felt a warmth in his chest, a mix of pride and gratitude. He realized that the bet that had brought him here was no longer important. What mattered was the journey, the lessons he had learned, and the connection he had built with Clara. The turning point had come not from a wager or a test, but from a moment of real challenge and shared effort. The storm, the runaway calf, and the demanding tasks had revealed not only Jack's courage and determination, but also the strength of their partnership. Clara had seen that he was more than a gambler or a boastful cowboy. He was someone who could face challenges with integrity, patience, and heart. And Jack had seen that Clara was more than a legend. She was a woman of wisdom, compassion, and unwavering strength. As the weeks continued, Jack and Clara's relationship continued to grow, built on trust, respect, and shared experience. They faced the challenges of ranch life together, from unpredictable weather to demanding work, and through it all, their bond strengthened. Jack had learned that winning someone's heart was not about grand gestures or bravado, but about consistency, effort, and sincerity. Clara had learned that Jack was more than a bet or a challenge. He was a man willing to grow, to learn, and to stand by her side through anything. By the end of this period, Jack Sullivan had reached a new understanding of life, love, and partnership. The bet that had brought him to Clara's ranch had transformed into something far more meaningful. He had faced real challenges, earned respect, and formed a deep, genuine connection with the woman who had once seemed untouchable. Together, they had discovered the strength of trust, the power of courage, and the value of working together toward a common goal. And so, as the sun set over the Texas plains, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple, Jack and Clara stood side by side, looking out over the land they had worked so hard to protect and maintain. The turning point had passed, and with it came a sense of accomplishment, understanding, and anticipation for what the future held. Their story was no longer about a lost bet. It was about two people discovering each other, learning from each other, and finding something far more valuable than either could have imagined: partnership, trust, and the beginnings of love. The weeks of hard work, lessons, and shared experiences had brought Jack Sullivan and Clara James closer than either of them had expected. What had begun as a bet, a simple wager in a dusty saloon in Laredo, had transformed into a journey neither could forget. Jack had come to Clara's ranch as a confident, somewhat reckless young cowboy, ready to prove himself through charm and bravado. But over time, he had learned humility, patience, and the true meaning of strength. Clara, once cautious and wary of outsiders, had come to see Jack as someone genuine, dependable, and worthy of trust. As the final days of the challenge approached, Jack felt a mixture of excitement and reflection. He knew that the bet that had brought him here no longer mattered. What mattered was the bond he had formed with Clara, the respect they had built for each other, and the connection that had grown through sweat, effort, and shared experiences. Each day had taught him something new, not just about ranch work or horsemanship, but about life, responsibility, and the kind of partnership that could endure challenges and adversity. One morning, Jack woke to find the prairie bathed in soft sunlight. The air was crisp and fresh, carrying the scent of wildflowers and damp earth. Clara had already begun her morning chores, and Jack joined her without hesitation, knowing that these simple acts were as meaningful as any grand gesture. They worked side by side, feeding the animals, checking fences, and preparing the ranch for the day. Each task was completed with care and attention, a testament to the lessons Jack had learned, and the respect he now had for the work and for Clara herself. During a quiet moment, Clara handed Jack a cup of water and offered a small, approving smile. "You've come a long way, Jack," she said. "Not just in skill, but in character. You've proven that you're reliable, thoughtful, and capable. That counts more than any bet or challenge ever could." Jack felt warmth in his chest, a mix of pride and gratitude. He realized that her words reflected not just his accomplishments, but the journey they had shared, the long hours, the laughter, the lessons, and the quiet moments that had brought them together. The following days were filled with preparation and final tasks around the ranch. Jack and Clara worked closely, tending to livestock, repairing fences, and ensuring that everything was in order. Each activity reinforced the partnership they had built. Jack had learned to anticipate Clara's needs, to act with thoughtfulness and care, and to take responsibility without needing direction. Clara, in turn, recognized Jack's growth and his willingness to embrace challenges with humility and integrity. Together, they had created a rhythm, a balance of work, trust, and understanding that made the ranch run smoothly and made their connection undeniable. One afternoon, Clara suggested they take a break and ride out to the edge of the prairie. Jack agreed eagerly, excited for a moment of calm and a chance to enjoy the beauty of the land they had worked so hard to care for. As they rode side by side, the wind blowing through their hair and the sun casting golden light across the fields, Jack felt a deep sense of contentment. He realized that the bond they shared was more than respect or admiration. It was trust, understanding, and something he could not yet fully name, but that filled him with hope and happiness. Clara, too, felt the shift. She had watched Jack grow from a boastful young cowboy into a man capable of facing challenges, learning from mistakes, and earning respect through effort and sincerity. She admired his courage, his patience, and the way he had embraced every task with thoughtfulness and determination. As they rode together, she could see that Jack's intentions were genuine, that he had changed not because he had to, but because he wanted to grow and become a better partner, not just on the ranch, but in life. That evening, as the sky turned pink and orange with the setting sun, they returned to the ranch. Jack dismounted, helping Clara with her horse, and together they walked toward the barn. The air was calm, the prairie quiet, and for a moment it felt as if the world itself was holding its breath, allowing them to savor the moment. Jack turned to Clara, his heart full. "Clara," he began, his voice steady but warm, "I came here to fulfill a bet. But now I know it's about so much more than that. It's about what I've learned, what we've shared, and how much I respect and care for you." Clara looked at him, her eyes soft but strong, reflecting both pride and a quiet affection. In the following days, Jack continued to demonstrate his commitment, not through grand gestures but through consistency and thoughtfulness. He worked tirelessly, ensuring the ranch was in order, the animals were cared for, and Clara had support in every way she needed. Each day he showed patience, humility, and a willingness to continue learning, qualities that earned Clara's trust and admiration more than any bet ever could. Together, they faced small challenges, celebrated minor victories, and enjoyed moments of quiet joy. Jack had come to understand that love, respect, and partnership were built through effort, understanding, and mutual support. The turning point came one evening when they sat together on a hill overlooking the prairie, watching the sun sink below the horizon. Jack felt a deep sense of clarity. "Clara," he said softly, "I've learned more than I ever imagined I would when I took that bet. I've learned about hard work, patience, courage, and respect. But most importantly, I've learned about you, about who you are, and how much I admire and care for you. I don't want this to be about a bet anymore. I want it to be about us." Clara's eyes met his, reflecting the depth of her own feelings. She had seen his growth, his sincerity, and the strength of his character. Slowly, she reached for his hand, a small but powerful gesture of connection and trust. From that moment on, their relationship shifted from challenge to partnership. The bet had brought Jack to Clara, but it was the weeks of shared work, learning, and courage that had built something lasting. Jack realized that winning her heart was not about proving himself in a single act or completing a task. It was about demonstrating care, respect, and a willingness to be present, reliable, and genuine every day. Clara recognized the same qualities in him, seeing a man capable of love, trust, and partnership, not just physical strength or bravado. As the months passed, Jack and Clara became a true team. They managed the ranch together, shared responsibilities, and supported each other in every aspect of life. Their relationship grew deeper, built on trust, respect, and shared experiences. Jack had discovered that the woman who could challenge him was also the one who inspired him to be better, to work harder, and to care more deeply. Clara had found in Jack a partner who had grown into someone dependable, thoughtful, and genuinely worthy of her trust and affection. The townspeople of Laredo began to notice the change in Jack. The once reckless cowboy who had arrived to fulfill a bet had become someone respected, capable, and admired. And Clara, known for her strength and independence, now had a partner who complemented her in every way, someone who could match her courage, share her work, and earn her heart through sincerity and effort. Their story became known as one of transformation, respect, and the unexpected ways in which love could arrive, even through a lost bet. Eventually, Jack and Clara celebrated their hard work, their achievements, and the bond they had built. It was not a lavish celebration, but a quiet acknowledgement of everything they had accomplished together. They sat by the fire one evening, watching the stars emerge in the clear Texas sky. Jack turned to Clara, taking her hand gently. "I don't know what the future holds," he said, "but I do know that I want to face it with you side by side every step of the way." Clara squeezed his hand, a smile lighting her face. "And I want that too, Jack," she replied softly. "You've proven yourself not just through work or courage, but through who you are. That's what matters most." In the end, Jack Sullivan had won far more than a bet. He had won the trust, respect, and heart of a woman who could challenge him, inspire him, and bring out the best in him. Clara James, too, had gained a partner who was capable, sincere, and dedicated, not just to the ranch, but to the partnership they had built together. Their journey had begun with a wager, but it had ended with love, respect, and a shared understanding that true connection comes from effort, courage, and authenticity. And so, on the wide, open plains of Texas, Jack and Clara stood together, looking out over the land they had cared for, the animals they had tended, and the life they had built. What had begun as a lost bet had become a story of growth, courage, partnership, and the kind of love that could endure challenges and triumphs alike. Jack had discovered that sometimes the greatest victories are not measured in money or wagers, but in trust earned, respect gained, and hearts won. Clara had discovered the same, finding in Jack a man who had become worthy of her life, her partnership, and her love. Their story, told and retold by the people of Laredo, became a legend, not because of a bet, but because of the courage, sincerity, and love that had transformed two lives forever. Jack Sullivan and Clara James had learned that true connection is earned through shared effort, mutual respect, and the willingness to grow together, no matter the challenge. And in that, they had both truly won, the kind of victory that lasts a lifetime.